Hey everyone, what is going on tonight? I got a special episode of Star Wars Gazer today for a Star Wars show that talks about everything Star Wars and more. As I say in my videos, tonight you get the more. Tonight we are going full blast nerd. Not just Star Wars, we're talking Batman, Lord of the Rings, possible Bigfoot sightings as you see in his cup there. Everything nerdum and more. We wanted to give it to you guys, so here we are to talk everything nerd. I got my boy down below me, a halfwit down there. That's my artist. That's my man down there. Designed this logo up top. I got my man Andy Garcia, also known as Andy Classified. His
Hello
Instagram
there.
and Twitter handles are there. General Kenobi. I had to finish that. I'm sorry. I had to.
Thank
I
you.
couldn't let that one go.
I appreciate
almost
that. It brings me such joy.
I almost came in with the general classified.
Oh, there you go. General Classified. General Classified.
That would have been great.
That would have been really great. Really great. So we're here to talk.
Slow the uptake.
So we're here to talk everything nerd. I'm going to try and get us started on a topic, and we're going to see where this thing goes. So here we go. You guys know my main thing on my channel is the Star Wars, right? I love prequels. So I want your guys' take on the current state of Star Wars and just kind of where you would like to see things go, but where you see things going with the state it's in right now. So which one of you guys want to go first? Halfway,
How
you want
about
to go?
You start.
Halfway, you go.
Here I go. I've been put on the soapbox. Current state of Star Wars right now. Insert image of me tearing my hair out. It's what to say. There's so much that you could say about it. Like, I mean, it feels like I don't know what to say. I really don't. Like, I lost for words. Really, it's just it's really hard to see something that Disney was handling so well through the Clone Wars and even like somewhat through Rebels. Like, I know there have been a lot of people who have like talked a lot of trash on Rebels, but I mean, it starts a little slow, but I feel like it kind of delves into a little bit more of the lore side of Star Wars, which I love to see. Like, I feel like that's not really explored as much in the movies, and the fact that there is a show that has kind of dived into or delved, I guess, into some of those aspects, specifically as I'm thinking of like the little time travel cave towards the end of season 3 or 4 or whatever that was. Like just and the wolves and everything, just the implication of all of that. Like there was just so much like that. I don't know. It was really cool, and the fact that that has gone into where we are now with the sequels and the Acolyte, and I mean even the Book of Boba Fett and like Ahsoka. Like it feels like the characters have just kind of been turned into wet cardboard versions of themselves, and that's really sad to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. You know, like especially with the Acolyte and stuff, you know, there's moments of Ahsoka. I think Ahsoka and Obi-Wan. Now the bar is set low with Disney, obviously, but I think Ahsoka and Obi-Wan are probably the two best things we've gotten out of Disney in a long while.
I'll come back to you with Mandalorian.
Besides the Mandalorian.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say I'll come back to you with Mandalorian, okay. But yeah.
Besides the Mandalorian, but seasons 1 and 2. Season 3 was okay.
Season 3 was alright.
Yeah, have you watched any of like the sequel to Clone Wars, which was Bad Batch?
Bad Batch?
Yes.
I watched some on and off. That was pretty good. Yeah, that was pretty good.
I've same here. I've seen it on and off. My brother, he watched it more than I did. I just was not too interested, but the times that I have sat down and watched it, I was like, "Oh, this is really good."
Like
I can.
The Bad Batch was
the cinematography was good. Yeah, the cinematography was done well. Like I remember scenes from that show, just walking past it and being like, "Oh, that actually looks really, really cool. I should watch that sometime." And then not watching it because I'm really bad with that sort of thing. But yeah. No, and then just the fact that they were willing to kill off some of the characters was wild for me as well. Like that was really cool to see that they're willing to take those broad strokes to kill off these main characters, which they couldn't really do in the Clone Wars. Outside of the clones that weren't in any of the movies, like
which for me, like that aspect is one of the reasons I actually really liked Rogue One is the two main characters dying at the end.
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
know.
it
It
was
shows the
incredible.
cost.
Excuse you, all of the main characters dying at the end.
Which I think is really bold for Disney, especially now, because nowadays they don't want to kill anyone off because merchandising and spin-off series
Right.
money,
and cameos. You lose
Yeah.
the possibility of cameos when you kill off a character.
Yeah.
So now
Exactly.
no one, as Luke says in The Last Jedi, no one's ever really gone.
Hmm.
Right.
So Disney
Right.
is just like, no, we're not going to kill anyone because we lose potential with that.
I mean,
Yeah.
to be fair, the same thing can be said for comics, like any comic. I think, man, to think back, I think there are only two characters that I've ever really heard of that died and stayed dead, being Pharaoh Lad from the Legion of Superheroes and Gwen Stacy from Spider-Man. And even then, it's just like there's multiversal versions, like but like the Prime Earth Gwen Stacy is still dead. Like those are the only two I can even think of that have stayed dead for any amount of time.
That's interesting.
I see.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know if you can really say that, like, just because it's been a thing for forever. But, I mean, I definitely see where you're coming from. Like, just the fact that they're willing to kill off characters is really cool. Cough, cough, Ahsoka, cough, cough.
Yeah, right. I know.
I
Cough, cough, Darth Maul.
I honestly
well, Darth
enjoyed.
Maul.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, Darth Maul's an interesting way to take it. I just mean, like,
He is.
you know, when you're stabbing people when people aren't dying from stab wounds, it's like it takes the impact off of it.
Reva.
But that's another thing that's been talked to death. Whatever. Yeah.
Do not speak to me of Reva. I was trying to come up with a Saruman quote there, but it didn't work.
Have any of you seen the Patterson cut of the Kenobi show?
I
No.
think I have it downloaded. I don't think I've watched it.
You need to watch it. He did. I just watched it the other night. He did a phenomenal job with that, recutting it and everything. Like, oh man, it's
Interesting.
so much better than the show. It's a 2.5 hour movie now, and it's awesome.
I know
It
that
cuts out any of the fluff that you don't need. That's cool.
Yeah,
I didn't even
I know
know
that-
that until now.
I know that-
so.
I know that my brother, he watched the Ahsoka Patterson cut, and he said
that's
it
my
was really
next
good.
one. Yeah, I want to watch that one
Interesting.
next.
I heard it was really good. I personally enjoyed the Ahsoka show up until the very end, and then I was kind of like, "What are we doing now?" Okay.
Right.
I didn't like the way they handled Ezra and Thrawn. It was just like the show was more interesting up until we got to that planet, and then it was like, "Oh, okay, this is what you chose to do." But it was still good. I enjoyed it. I had a critique,
Oh,
I lost my train of thought.
You're good. I will say I actually liked kind of what they did at the end there. I mean, it's going to be the son, the father, and
Yes.
the daughter. I'm excited about that.
That's where I wanted to go, and I was expecting the show to be more like that, like you mentioned, Halfwit. Rebels season 4, you had the caves. I want to say Cave of Worlds. I don't think that's the right term. You had the cave. You had the
sounds right.
Loth Wolves. The Loth Wolves.
Mhm.
Like I thought that was what Ahsoka was going to be, or the World Between Worlds.
Yeah.
That
More of the weird lore stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was what Ahsoka was going to be, and we only got the World Between Worlds for an episode, and everything else was just like the Night Sisters. Why? We have so much other cool things to do instead of magic.
I do think
And I
season
mean, we've
2 is
talked
going to
about
be
the
a
Night
lot
Sisters
more of
before,
that.
too.
Yeah.
Like if
Say that
you
again?
want Night Sisters, just go watch the Clone Wars.
Right.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yep.
I actually have a friend of mine that worked on Clone Wars, and he quit Lucasfilm because of the Night Sisters arc.
Really?
Really?
Interesting.
I didn't know that. What did he do over there at Lucasfilm?
So he was a character designer, and
Wow.
so he designed
That's
some
so cool.
characters, and I want to say he also did animation, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
But they were working on. I don't know what episode, what arc it is, but it's where the Night Sisters. Probably when they bring back Darth Maul. It was a sequence with the Night Sisters, and he kept. He was a believer, and he wasn't comfortable with that sort of thing with dark magic and all that, and he kept trying to ask his boss, like, "Hey, can you put me on a different episode?" And the guy was like, "No, we need you on here. Need you on here." So he would go back to work and just had a real sense of like very unease. He's like, "I'm not comfortable with this." So finally, he told the guy, "Either put me on a different episode, or I'm gonna walk out." And the guy said, "Okay, go walk out because I'm not changing it for you." And so he walked out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hey, props to him for standing for what he believes in, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
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 Indeed.
I
He's a
I
great guy.
I will say I don't know if you heard me, but I think season 2 is supposed to be more towards the father, the son, and the daughter, right? Because you have the daughter who is
Mhm.
supposed to be, I think, Ahsoka, and then you have the father who is that supposed to be Anakin, right? Because wasn't he offered in the Clone Wars? Didn't the father like offer him the chance to take his spot? I think in the Clone Wars there was like the dark, is it the
I have no idea.
Mortis arc or whatever, where I think he asks Anakin to take his spot. But which you could see that like in that sequence with Ahsoka, right? He perfectly flushes out the dark side and the light side, right? He's trying to teach Ahsoka a lesson. He goes to the dark side, and then the minute she figures out the lesson, he calms down and brings himself back to the light side, like that perfect
Mhm.
balance.
Gotcha.
So
I think with the way that they were going, at least when Clone Wars was still under George Lucas's control, I think the whole setup for the father, the son, the daughter, I honestly think they were trying to set up Luke and Leia as the son and daughter, and then Anakin as the father. Because we
Which
know that
makes sense.
yeah,
it makes sense, but then I could be wrong, but I feel like George Lucas's original idea for the sequel trilogy was to focus on Leia a little bit, and
yeah.
I think
instead,
there's.
I think that was the hope. The point, the hope. I think.
Hmm.
I could be wrong.
I think there are several different ways that it's been theorized that the sequel trilogy would have gone under George Lucas, and I think that, unless there's some sort of like direct interview in which he says where he would have gone with it, we just can't really be sure. Like,
It's true.
There's been, I think, a couple years ago, there was a book written either about George Lucas or about Star Wars, and George Lucas gave his original plans for the sequel trilogy. It would have followed other characters, but you would have had Luke rebuilding the Jedi Order. You would have had Leia in charge of the. It's not the Empire. What would it? New
New
Republic.
Republic. Yeah.
Then Han Solo as a general, stuff like that, and then.
Mm-hmm.
But you actually would have had Darth Maul come back. That was his original plan, was to bring back Darth Maul as the main antagonist for the sequel
Yes,
trilogy.
absolutely. Yeah, and then have
And
him as well. Wasn't he like the head of the Red Sun, which is kind of what they built up to in Han Solo.
is it Red Sun or Crimson Sun?
Crimson Sun, something like that. I'm not entirely sure. It's close. Red and crimson are kind of close on the color wheel. I don't know.
Sure, we'll go with that. Some sort of sun.
It's somewhere. Black Sun? I don't know. Black Hand? No, that's a
some-
Batman thing. What am I
Some
doing?
sun.
Something. I don't know.
Oh man. I love all the Star Wars talk, but like I said, we want to do some more talk. So I'm gonna bring it to
Absolutely.
Mr. Andy Classified here for a hot minute. Mr. Andy Classified, I only watched the first 3 or 4 episodes, but the Rings of Power came out season 2, and I wanted to get your
season
take
2.
on I wanted to get your take on the Rings of Power and kind of what you've been feeling regarding
Gotcha.
that.
Well, I have actually. I'm gonna try to avoid sounding like a broken record because I know everyone's been voicing their opinions. But this is what I'll say. Lord of the Rings of Power has been a trash show as far as being accurate to the Lord of the Rings, Tolkien's original work. But it is so bad. I actually think it's really good. I enjoy it.
Okay.
Even though I groan, and when me and my brother would watch the show, we would just scream at the TV, not scream, but yell and audibly groan at the TV, just like, why would you do that? But it's fun. I enjoy it. I don't understand why people say like everything's so dumb and every decision is terrible. I can't stand any of the characters. I love the characters. I think they're poorly written, but you can still see through it and be like, I see what they were trying to go for.
Yeah.
And it's a really enjoyable show. The music is top notch. The visuals, especially for season 2, there's only one shot really for me where the visuals are like, oh, you can tell that it didn't composite that very well. Everything else has been like spectacular.
Yeah.
The acting is really good, just terrible scripts. But yeah, I'm sorry.
So
Do not
no,
judge
don't be
the
sorry.
actor by
This
the
is what we're
writing of
here
his
talking.
script.
So like when you said it's so bad, it's good. Explain that a little bit.
So now they did fix this a little bit in season 2. Season 2, actually, if anyone hasn't finished or watched season 2 of Rings of Power, it is much better than season 1. And the reason is episode 1, people do what they should have done in season 1. They actually scold Galadriel and tell her off, and she gets in trouble for the things that she's done.
Dang.
And it is so, is that the word, cathartic, to be like, oh my goodness, she's finally getting told off after all this mess that she's done and the way
Yeah.
she's behaved.
Finally.
Someone saying like, how dare you? It's just like, oh, it's like a breath of fresh air. But I lost my train of thought. Okay, yeah. So basically the writing has just been, from season 1 was atrocious, and that's why it was so bad. It just, I think the main problem was there's nothing canon in season 1 of Rings of Power. Almost the entire first season, other than the names and places, are just original ideas for the TV show.
Yeah, because I don't
Gotcha.
think Tolkien ever wrote anything about that time period, did he?
He did write about the Second Age, but the first season, nothing. Pardon me, nothing in that season takes place in the books. Season 2 is much better because we actually have canon lore and canon events to play with, and so they tell. And granted, now they get some things wrong. They're trying to take like 300 years of history and condense it into like a month, and so a lot of things just are going crazy. You're just like, they got the order of how they build the rings out of order, and everything's wrong with that. But they did a good job of telling a story, and
Of
yes,
telling
some of
their
the
version
events,
of the story, yeah.
yeah, their version, and some
Yeah.
of the events are like, oh man, this thing should have happened over here, and these sort of things. But with their version of the story, you're like, you know what? It was good. The arc with Celebrimbor and Anatar building the Rings of Power is phenomenal. Like, props to the writer, whoever wrote those scripts for those episodes. Incredible job. And the acting, the music, everything is just spot on. Everything else with the other characters is kind of like, okay. Like I'm still invested, but less so. But the moment you go back to Anatar and Celebrimbor's and you see Anatar just messing with Celebrimbor's mind and help getting him to go further into building the Rings of Power is really worth the watch. And then finally, when Celebrimbor is able to break out of Anatar's illusions and realizes what's been going on, you're just like, that actor sold the performance.
That's cool.
It's incredible.
That's cool. Now, Joel, Halfwit, I know you haven't seen any of those.
I've seen the
but-
first season, and I do have
Did you see the first season? Okay.
take. I do have a take on it. I do have a take on Rings
Okay.
of Power.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not it's more of a statement of canon, right? And where that applies. I think that the Rings of Power and the Lord of the Rings movies and the Hobbit movies are all a part of the same. I think they're probably. I think I would consider them all a part of their own canon outside of the Lord of the Rings, because just considering even the Lord of the Rings, there are things that were very heavily changed. Specifically, the one thing that comes to mind most specifically is just Gimli's character assassination. I mean, I see your look of shock and awe, but I mean, just from the books to the movies, they took any honor that Gimli had and just shattered it for the sake of the bit, the haha funny Scottish dwarf man, which is, it's a choice. They need the comic relief. Like, Merry and Pippin can only get you so far when they're only in certain parts of the story. Like, you need something to bring a little bit of levity into that, or at least I would think so in just the context of what they had going. And then another one being Faramir's just character mutilation that is Faramir, which I am so sad because he was such an interesting dichotomy to Boromir, instead of making him Boromir 2.0, except angst because dad hates me. it's like they're still amazing movies, and I love them. But I think that they have tweaked these things enough for the story that they are willing to for the story that they meant to make, and I think that they executed it just brilliantly. That I think that considering it its own canon is not exactly too big of a stretch, right?
I'll give you a minute to respond. No, I'm just kidding. But seriously, I mean, you think you have?
Yes,
You
please
wanna
pick me apart,
respond?
destroy me, hit me. I want you to do
Okay.
it.
So point one. No. I understand what you're saying, and I do honestly get what you're saying, especially with Faramir's character. I personally prefer the changes that they made to the movie for Faramir.
Okay,
Now, granted, there is
Faramir?
one instance for Faramir, correct? There is one
Okay.
instance where Faramir in the book is far more interesting, and that's the
Okay.
choice when they're in the little cave that they're hiding in, him, Frodo, and his Sam and his men, and he gets an inkling that Frodo has something with him, and he almost goes to ask, like, what is it you're carrying? And then he stops himself and says, you know what, I think it's better if I don't ask. And so that's it, and that's it. That's where they leave it. He's
Exactly.
like,
Right.
you got something I would rather not know, go on your merry way.
Yeah, whatever it is, go take it, do what you need to do, right?
Yes, it is an honorable thing, and you're correct in, like, oh, that's so cool. But I feel like it's also it kind of is a boring character at that point in the books. He's just like, oh, that's Boromir's brother, and he doesn't do much. Whereas in the movies, they give him a character, and he is the neglected child of Denethor, and he's essentially a hurt, even though he's grown to be an honorable man, he's still a hurt child, just like, I need the affection of my father. And he never gets it until Denethor catches on fire and realizes, oh, he loves his son, and then that's it.
Throws himself off the side, whatever. Which I think
exactly.
I think Denethor's death is so much more interesting in the books, where he's so lost to his own delusions that when it's found out that his son is still alive, he doesn't care and he burns himself on the pyre anyways. Like the description, I don't remember. I don't know if this is like if this is correct or not, but just the visceral description of you hear like him like. I think there was. I don't know. It sticks in my brain that I think there was just this visceral description of him laying, and you can hear like the sounds of him burning alive, and he's just lying on the pyre, eyes closed, which is wild. Like that stuck with me so hard.
Oh man, I need to reread the books again. It's been a while.
You have them there on your desk, don't you?
Right.
You're right.
You are right.
I have the pocket editions, which, fun fact, you could take these to church, and when the pastor says open up your Bible, you could open them up and no one would be none the wiser. As they're reading Leviticus and you're like, Tom Bombadil, you know.
And that's Andy Classified's Bible. That's what we just learned.
No. This is like the extra books of the Bible. Let me get the real Bible.
No, you're good.
Oh, please don't tell me it's the Silmarillion.
It's the Silmarillion. Here we go.
The Silmarillion. I have opinions on that book too.
I don't. I want to hear those.
I wish Tolkien would have been able to finish it.
Gotcha. I think it's. I'll let you finish.
Do you know like the what happened with the Silmarillion and what why it is the way that it is?
Yes, or at least
it was.
I believe I do.
From what I remember, from what I have heard and done the just most minimal of research, by the fact that I came across it by accident one day, was the son of J.R.R. I think Christopher, I think is his name. Yeah, Christopher. He worked with some people, and the Silmarillion was just a bunch of notes that Tolkien had written out just to world build. And they ended up trying to piece it together in a way that made sense, which is what the Silmarillion is. And I think there was a book that was there was a video that I watched a video that talked about a short story that Tolkien wrote, I think, about this man who was painting this tree, and then he died before he could finish it. And when he died, he was brought to the place of the actual tree where he could see it in full. He was never going to finish it on Earth, but it became more beautiful than ever now that he was dead and brought to the actual thing, which I think is interesting, because I wonder if that was Tolkien kind of talking about himself and the Silmarillion. Like, this is a project I know I will never see the end of, because I can always add more, and I will always be making revisions, and there will always be things to change and make better. And so as much as he is sad that he will never finish it, he is glad that he got to do what he did with it.
Interesting. I've never heard that story. I do know that the thing with the Silmarillion is that this isn't just notes of world building. This is stories and things that he wrote down on papers and napkins during his entire life. Like, I know that he started. I could be very wrong. So you fellow Tolkien nerds, please correct me in the comments. He started creating the Elvish language when he was 15, I believe.
I heard he was 8. But I could be wrong.
You know what? He was, the guy was a genius. We'll go with 3.
We'll go with that. Yeah, we'll go with 3 years old. I like that.
The meager age of 3. Yes, of course.
Exactly, of course. But these are
he was
all
making
stories
his own languages before he was able to speak in full.
There you go. His first words were in Elvish. But these are all stories that he wrote his entire life. And I do believe that he intended to finish the Silmarillion.
Classified, you're right. He was 13.
13? Okay. I think I said 15, but close.
Yeah.
But I know that when he originally was planning to publish The Lord of the Rings, he was trying to finish what was at that point the Silmarillion, and his goal was to publish the Silmarillion and The Lord of the Rings as one book, because he thought it's all one story. And the publishers told him, "No, we're not doing that. That's impossible. That's way too much." So
when you're trying to double the length of the Bible, like,
right,
the book is as wide as it is thick, like, jeepers.
Yeah.
And now,
carry around a brick.
Right. Yeah. And you mentioned halfwit that these are, like, a lot of these are stories that he either kept changing or never finished, and so Christopher had to bring it back or edit them together. It would be really interesting. Yeah, I would love to see what that finished version that he was going to publish with Lord of the Rings looked like.
Right. That would have been cool.
Is it the Silmarillion that we have, or was it something completely different?
Oh, I'm sure it was something completely different, because, again, he was continuing to work on it and edited his whole life, right?
Exactly,
I think he actually wrote about it when his wife died to a friend of his, whether that be C.S. Lewis or not, I don't really know. But I think I remember I heard, or I read something or heard something or saw something about him, and that he had written a letter to a friend about it. And because his wife had died, he had a lot more time to work on the Silmarillion, and as he was working on it, he kind of realized that it would never be finished. But again, I think it might play into that other manuscript that I came across. Again, don't exactly remember how. If it was anywhere, I think it was probably the YouTube channel Jess of the Shire. She does a lot of Lord of the Rings content. If you've never heard of her, go check her out. She's got a lot of really interesting stuff. Comparisons between book and movie characters and things, and watching every known version of the Lord of the Rings, which is a trip. Yeah, there are so many different titles. It's insane.
Have you seen any of the animated Lord of the Rings films?
I did growing up, yeah.
I saw Return of the King and I saw The Hobbit.
I'm not gonna lie, they're hard to watch.
And I know of the one with the rotoscoping. I am aware of it. I have not seen it, but I'm aware.
The Ralph Bakshi film, that's like being on acid. I've never been on acid, but I feel like
that's what you imagine it to be like.
I have no frame of reference for the acid, but I imagine that's pretty close what it's like.
It is so fascinating. But the cool thing is that is the film that Peter Jackson watched growing up. That was his version of Lord of the Rings. Huh. So when he created, or when he directed the Lord of the Rings, he was inspired by some of the things in that film.
Speaking
But
I
of
mean,
which,
there's a lot of similarities between the designs for the characters in that movie and the Lord of the
Very
Rings
much
that he
so.
created. Yeah,
speaking of which,
except
I
for
don't
the
know if you
naked
guys,
legs.
I don't know if you guys saw that Warner Brothers is actually and Discovery are actually creating two new films coming out. One
Yes.
in 2026. So it's called the one in 2026 is called The Hunt for Gollum, and it's the first film in the series, which will focus on the character of Gollum. Andy Serkis will direct and star in the film, reprising his role as Gollum. And Peter
Yes.
Jackson, Fran Walsh, and Philippia Boyens are producing the film.
Okay, that's
Yes.
awesome because Andy
I
Serkis. I don't know if you. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not going to talk too much. I'm going to let you say what you're going to say, and then I will
no
go into
no
what I
you
have.
no you go first.
Okay. So I love Andy Serkis because I think that was probably from a Just of the Shire video, but I remember hearing like that he initially wasn't going to do Lord of the Rings, and then I think his wife convinced him to read the book, and then he read the books and fell in love with the character of Gollum. And now he does also. I think he like reads the Lord of the Rings or
He does
something, like he does readings of
on
the Lord of the
Audible
Rings.
and stuff. Yep.
Yeah, like he is super invested into the thing. And I also love that because and this is a bit of a side tangent, but in the filming of Black Panther, him and the actor who also plays Bilbo Baggins were they were quoted as being the quote unquote Tolkien white guys of the film, because they were. It's so funny. I love that bit so much. But yeah, I just the fact that Andy Serkis just from going from not wanting to do it to his wife telling him he should, to getting this into it and loving this series this much is just, man, it's an IRL character arc that I've just fallen in love with. It's so fun.
So cool.
And without that, his performance, not only for the voice acting, but like doing the motion capture and all that,
Oh
we wouldn't
yeah, the motion
have
capture. Oh my gosh, yeah.
we wouldn't have Planet of the Apes, we wouldn't have King Kong, we wouldn't anything motion capture, which is half of visual effects now, we wouldn't have without
Without
the
him.
Lord of the
Yeah,
Rings.
no. Again, that's another video that she talks about, and I think that's probably where I came from, where I got that little tidbit about Andy Serkis and his wife making him read the books before he did the thing. But yeah, she does a whole video on that and just everything that Serkis did and how that revolutionized CGI as a whole and
So much
motion
so.
capture as well. Like it's incredible. Like it's so cool. Just how just the way that these pieces all fit together. It's just ugh.
No, what is it? There was when you talk about like visual effects and all that, there was also a program that they designed for, I don't know if it was for Fellowship of the Ring, the opening sequence during the Battle of the Last Alliance, or if it was for the Two Towers. They created a program for CG armies, for soldiers to swing their swords, do everything on their own, instead of an animator having to go and animate every single character in an army of a million. And that is what made possible all the CG armies that we have in movies today. Like that,
and it's really
all that
interesting.
Effort.
Yeah, and it's even more interesting because I heard something about that specific whatever that they used for that, because I remember reading somewhere that some of the soldiers would opt to flee.
Interesting.
Which I think is so cool, because it was like a simulation thing, right? They would pit these armies against each other, and some of the soldiers would opt to flee from the battlefield like before it even started.
That's
which
funny.
Is so cool. Like,
Gotcha.
and this was in like what, 2003? Like what?
Yeah. I do want to react a little bit, Morgan, to the news of the Hunt for Gollum movies. However, I do want to tell one little anecdotal story about the Two Towers.
Okay.
If I may.
Yep.
There was a moment where we almost did not get the Two Towers, and the film had been completed, and it almost got stolen outside of London. So what happened was, they completed the Two Towers, edited everything, ready to go. They put it on an iPod. This is back in like 2002.
I remember hearing about this. Yeah.
They put it on an iPod.
I haven't heard this.
They gave it to a guy and said, like, he has to fly from New Zealand to London and go give it to like the studio heads of New Line Cinema in London. And so he gets off the plane. He's got this iPod with the only copy of The Two Towers on this iPod. And as he exits the airport, because I guess New Line Cinema's headquarters was like a walk away from the airport. As he leaves the airport, two guys start following him. And at first, he's just going his way, doesn't mind. And then he starts to, he's taking turns and going places, and he starts to realize these guys are constantly following him and watching him.
Tailing him hard, yeah.
And he gets really nervous, and he finally just starts running, and these guys start running, and they're chasing him all the way until he runs into New Line Cinema's headquarters, and then they back off. And supposedly they must have known what was on that iPod or something. Or maybe they didn't. Maybe they just decided, hey, that guy we're going to rob. But had they done so, who knows if we would have
but we got it.
That's crazy.
This man's instincts saved an entire trilogy.
It's so true. Props to that guy.
I have heard that story before. It's wild. Like that is All
right, so what's your reaction?
Wild.
Oh, yeah. So I'm really excited for the Hunt for Gollum movies. I think it should only be one, and I've heard rumors that it's on and off if it's one Gollum movie and there's another film coming later of a different series, or if it's two Gollum movies. I've heard recently that it's two Gollum films, which I'm not too keen on. I feel like it's possible they can make the same mistakes that they made with The Hobbit, turning one book into 3 movies. Instead of here, they're doing like a couple paragraphs into 2 movies. But I think it works because I've heard a lot of people say like, oh, The Hunt for Gollum, there's 1 paragraph of story there in the book, and there's nothing to add. I think there's a lot to add because we know that this journey,
it's 500
The Hunt
years.
for Gollum, I don't think it's 500 years. This is the 15 years in between.
Oh, okay.
Frodo getting the ring and Frodo leaving the Shire.
Oh,
and so
okay. I thought we were talking about the whole 500 years of Gollum's existence. Like,
oh no,
because he's been around for 500. That would be so interesting. But yeah, no, the Hunt for Gollum is that little 15-minute.
So it's just okay.
Year time period.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't. My hope is Gollum is not the main character. I think Aragorn and Gandalf are the main characters because it's the hunt for Gollum. It's all about.
Okay.
There's a lot of story there. There's Gandalf. He's kept everything in pretty much secret about his misgivings about the ring, about Frodo, about Bilbo. And finally, he's like, I need help. So he finally reaches out to Aragorn. They must have met at some point. Says, hey, there's all this stuff going on. I need help finding this creature Gollum. And then it's their journey finding Gollum. And then they're able to bring in Legolas and the Woodland Elves because we know that Gandalf gave Gollum as a prisoner is it Mirkwood? Yeah, Mirkwood. To Thranduil to safeguard, and that's when he's able to escape and all that stuff. But there's a lot of story there. And I personally really enjoyed the Hobbit movies. I know a lot of people are like, oh, the Hobbits are terrible. I think they're some of the most fun movies there is. If I can get the grounded reality of the Lord of the Rings with the fun and adventure and action that the Hobbit has, the outlandish stuff, I don't care if I see Legolas flying through the air doing crazy things. I love this sort of stuff. So Aragorn, Gandalf, Legolas.
No, go for it.
Go ahead.
Yeah, finish your thought. Yeah.
And then you can also bring in Aragorn and Arwen's story a little bit more. I think there's a lot of potential for some really fun movies. Just they need to be cautious, and I think Andy Serkis will do a good job.
Yeah. I was gonna say with the way that with the way Tolkien formatted the Lord of the Rings books, I mean, you could argue that the Lord of the Rings was meant to be a musical. with how much music he put into the books, you could argue that you could make the Lord of the Rings a musical.
That's interesting.
That is that there is a musical out there.
Oh, I do. I know, and I've heard so many interesting things about it. Again, Just of the Shire actually did a couple videos on it, which is super interesting. Yeah, like she does a ton of stuff on Lord of the Rings. Highly recommend for anybody who's a fan of Lord of the Rings. She does a lot of really good content on Lord of the Rings. So yeah, no, like she did a couple videos on it. She did one just before it got redone recently at like a one. There was like a single location where they started the show outside and then brought it inside, which I think is so cool. But it only works in the one place, which is fine. It's fair. Like do what you got with where you got it, which is so cool. But I've heard of the disaster that was the first showing of it.
I think I
Orcs on
actually on
stilts.
YouTube saw some of it, and I
Orcs on
turned it
stilts and
off because
spinning
I was
stages.
like,
Yeah.
"What is this?"
Yes. Yeah. No. It's when you
Interesting.
try to jam pack 9 hours of movies into 3 hours of onstage show, it gets a little kooky.
Interesting.
Understandable.
Yeah.
Understandable.
So, kind of moving on a little bit because some other nerdy stuff. No, you're fine. This is great. This is what I wanted. I wanted nerd talk about all this stuff. There's just a lot to get to because I want to.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
And there's a lot to talk about Lord of the Rings.
There really is. Lord of the Rings is so good, and there's so much to talk about. Tom Bombadil as a character, as you brought up at one point, whether on the video or off, like that's such an interesting character. Like especially when you kind of think of it as Tolkien self-insert, like that's so interesting. Like, do you know about that sort of thought process?
I'm do. I've heard that.
Yeah, that feels like a pretty surface level Lord of the Rings, like the second level of the iceberg. Like once you start to get into it, that's one of the things you figure out pretty quickly.
I wouldn't say that's surface level. I think that's a pretty. If you're thinking in terms of the iceberg, I think. Pardon me. I think that's pretty far down there.
Are we just that big of nerds that I think it's that high?
I think we're just that big of nerds that we think it's surface level stuff. Okay.
Obviously, yeah.
Sorry, Morgan. I will let you change the subject if I can add one little thing about Tom Bombadil.
Go for it. You're good.
Now, thank goodness this was not the case. But before season 2 of Rings of Power came out, there was a leak talking about how Tom Bombadil would be used in this version of the show. And I actually kind of wish we had seen this. I wish we had seen this because it would have been really interesting. Their take was going to be that Tom Bombadil is Morgoth, but like he's being punished for the sin, for the awful that is the First Age, and so he's sent to Middle Earth and is given this body and says, "You're now Tom Bombadil." And so Tom Bombadil is Morgoth, and that's why the ring has no power over him because he's a greater being than Sauron. And then Goldberry, his wife, would have been Ungoliant, the spider, Sheila's mother that tried to eat the Silmarils from Morgoth's hand.
She ate herself, didn't she? Though, isn't that the lore that she ate herself? She was so consumed by her darkness that,
and so ravenous that she ended up eating herself. Yeah. So that was the leak that was out there, was that it was going to be those two. Thank goodness it didn't happen, but it still would have been kind of intriguing.
Yeah, it would have been an interesting take, which again would separate it canon-wise from Lord of the Rings even further, or just the general Tolkien text verse in general.
Yeah,
indeed.
Well, moving on a little bit here, one of the other things that I know, at least Halfwit and I are big nerds about this, and I've yet to hear your thoughts on this, Andy Classified, is Batman.
Yes,
we are big old Batman nerds, and the second one is coming out with Robert Pattinson next year.
Oh, is there a second one?
Or they're filming next year. Yeah.
There have been talks about it since the first one came out.
Yeah, and apparently, so I was listening to an interview with Matt Reeves a couple weeks ago, and he was saying that this second movie actually takes place like 4 weeks after the events of the first one. So it's relatively soon. And so in between the 4 weeks is where you have a little bit of the end of like the Penguin story. And so what happens is after the first one, he said, there's, the rich side of the Gotham is getting all of the help and everything they need to rebuild, but the slums and stuff are still forgotten. And that's where Penguin makes his mark, is he steps in as the, I guess, quote, savior of those people, right? And then so he said like about 4 He said it's a few weeks. I said 3 or 4 weeks after is what it
Yeah.
sounded like of
That
the
sounds
events
about
of the
right, yeah.
first one. So, halfwit, I mean, what do you think?
This has just brought something to my mind. A little connection that happened in between. I am a really big fan of Sean Murphy's White Knight series. He has a
Okay.
whole little world of his own that he does. And in the first book, one of the things that Jack Napier does is, or the Joker in that universe is, he's a dual personality thing. That's a whole topic for whatever. But one of the things that he does is Jack Napier has come back as a good guy. He has been cured of the Joker. Is what the story is, and one of the things that he does is he kind of becomes this white knight for what is it, the slums area. There's a name for it, one that I have completely forgotten, and I hate myself for it.
Not like the Narrows or anything like
The
that.
Narrows.
Is
That sounds right. Yeah, I think it's the Narrows. But he kind of becomes the savior for the Narrows because that's where a lot of Batman's escapades tend to happen and just kind of ravage this area. And because it's so dilapidated and downtrodden, there's really not a ton that goes into that. So Batman is older and jaded in this series, which is cool to see because he just does not trust Jack Napier in any respect, and he ends up blowing up a library because of it, and it's wild. Or no, Bane drops a library on Batman's head, which is again wild. But yeah, no, that's just it. Kind of made me think of that, like Joker, or not Joker. The Penguin is swooping in on the Narrows and kind of taking control there in a way that almost reminds me of what happened in the White Knight, because the Joker is he's going in to cement his hold there and becoming like the voice for the Narrows, which is a thing. And then that gets even crazier in the next two books, which is great and fun, and always you love to see that.
Yeah.
But that first book specifically is like, because I think the Penguin show is kind of framing the Penguin as like the savior for the Narrows, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's
and
how
that's
it's
kind of what
being-
that's kind of what Jack was in the White Knight. Was he was the savior to the Narrows. He was coming in and providing them with aid and help and attention where they weren't getting it before, and kind of like he was becoming the voice for the downtrodden. And I wonder if maybe they took a little bit of inspiration from that. Not a clue if they did. I'm saying this off the tip of the hat just because it came to my brain as like, this feels kind of similar to that, just from the broad overarching strokes.
Yeah.
But I think that's really, really cool because I think The White Knight is a great book and the art is beautiful and the story is really cool and deserves a little bit of recognition. Yeah. And I really hope Sean Murphy goes forward with the fourth part because I really want to see where he goes with it, because it looks like it's kind of trotting in the direction of the Frank Miller book that he did, The Dark Knight Returns, or whatever that is.
Well, I'll tell you one thing I'm excited for is the James Gunn Batman coming out, because that's going to have apparently Damian Wayne and stuff in it, which means that there's a lot that's happened,
Batman and Robin,
at that point. I mean,
is
Batman
that what it's
and Robin.
called?
Yeah.
Or
and there's
no, it's Batman Brave and the Bold is
it's
what the movie will be.
Yes.
Brave and the Bold. Batman Brave and the Bold, but it's based off of the Batman and Robin books. Yeah.
Right. But there's a lot that's happened, right? I mean, there's a lot of history before that could be explained, could be done, which is really, really cool. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to that. Now,
especially if it ties in at all to the David Cornswet Superman thing, or whatever that's called, whatever that is, the Superman legacy with the legacy's been dropped, whatever. Especially with how many characters they're bringing in, like these lesser used characters film wise, like just Mr. Terrific, Guy Gardner, Hawkman, Hawkgirl, something like that. Just all these characters that they're bringing in, like just the fact that they're using these characters and bringing them to screen is so cool. So I hope they continue with that in the Batman, especially if it's connected.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask you this question, but I gave my answer on a podcast, Star Wars Nerd podcast, called Tales from Peridia. And the question is this, and I'll explain my answer and then I'll ask you halfway. And then if Andy Classified, if you have a thought on it too, I'll let you go. It is, what is your favorite Batman? And my favorite Batman portrayed live action Batman. Okay.
Yeah.
Is what we're talking about. And my overall that I gave was actually Ben Affleck's Batman, because in the comics he is a bigger, broader shouldered Batman, Bruce Wayne. And I think out of all of the live actions that we've seen so far to date, he portrays that bigger, broader shouldered Batman Bruce Wayne better than the other guys have. The other guys seem too scrawny and small for that kind of role to me. Now, now there are aspects. Now the hard part is that, like, to me, there's different dimensions to this, right? Because he plays the best, like, Bruce Wayne Batman, like, because of his physique. But then I think I like the new Batman movie with Robert Pattinson. I don't necessarily like Robert Pattinson as Batman, but I like the grittiness of the movie and the darkness of the movie, right?
Yeah.
It felt like those Batman Arkham games, and it like pulled you in. For me, it pulled me in right away. The minute, like, from the beginning when he starts narrating and kind of monologuing, I'm like, whoa, okay, you got me. Like, this is cool. Like, it felt right.
Just to speak into that just a little bit, regarding the, it pulls you in. It, for me, like, that is it. That's the thing that the Batman does the best, is it feels like Gotham.
Right. Yep, it does.
That's
like
the thing.
gritty Gotham.
It feels like, rainy all the time. It just looks absolutely nasty. It feels like Gotham.
Yeah, 100%. And then, because and the other thing I liked about the Batman, not only is it gritty, but, like, he builds his own stuff, right? Like, you can tell it's not like the Batman with Christopher Nolan, where it's like he finds this in a tech basement and is like, does it come in black? Right? No. He actually builds this himself. You can tell he's built it off of some old muscle car, that he's like, he's been tinkering on himself. You can tell a lot of his gadgets he's made himself. He's tinkered on himself. Like, and that's true Batman form, in my opinion, is he makes all of his own stuff. Like, he doesn't find it and buy it. He makes it, right? And so there's just a lot of different,
both, right?
There's a little bit of both. I mean, he buys the technology for it,
both, right?
Right.
But then he cooks it up himself. Yeah.
Right. But it's not all he buys all the technology and just happens to wear it, kind of a thing, like, and so
he buys
that
what
was
he needs and then builds it from that. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, there are different aspects. Like, I like the grittiness of the new Batman and the fact that he works on his own stuff. I like Ben Affleck as the best, like, Bruce Wayne Batman. And then no, in my head, as of right now, nobody's ever going to top Heath Ledger's Joker. His performance as Joker was so unbelievably good that I just, as of right now, I can't see anyone topping that. So
you don't think Mark Hamill could do it?
Here's the deal. Mark Hamill is definitely the voice of Joker, but the physical aspect of playing Joker, I don't think Mark Hamill could get that the way Heath Ledger did.
I see.
I can see that. Yeah.
I think it's possible that Mark Hamill could.
Interesting.
I like, if you see, no, granted, I haven't seen a ton of it, but, like, if you see his, like, some of the shots of him, like, doing the voice acting for the Joker, he seems to really get in there with his physical language or body language. I feel like, I think Mark Hamill definitely needs a chance to be in one of these live action movies as the Joker, because to me he's the Joker. When I think the Joker, so this is kind of interesting and relevant because this wasn't planned. I've been starting the animated Batman series, which has been tremendously amazing. As an animation fan, I'm just, like, blown away. Like,
I grew up with
really
those.
hard.
Those came out in the 90s. I grew up with those. I actually own all of them. My kids love them. Yeah, I love the animated series. It's so good.
They're so dark and brooding, and just like this is a kid's film. This was made for TV for kids, and you're like, man, the 80s and 90s kids had it really good, where the writers and creators didn't treat them like children. They just said,
yeah,
all right, here's a story. You're a kid, enjoy it. And now it's like, oh, you can't do that. It's too dark for a little kid's show. You need humor. Batman's hardly, you only laugh if it's like, if Batman cracks a joke or the Joker, because to me, when I think of the Joker, I think of Mark Hamill's Joker.
Yeah.
Because he's very silly and very whimsical, but that's
brutal as
undertoned with brutality and super menacing, and I love it.
I mean, the interesting thing about that, right, is even there you're like, one of the stipulations that whoever it was that headed the show, they said you can't kill anybody because it's a kids show. You can't kill anyone. And so they made it worse than death by making you trapped behind the smile, which is terrifying.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And they've actually, I think that concept has actually been used since then in the Batman Endgame comic, specifically with Duke Thomas's parents. Because there's I don't know if you've read any of the comics. There's a comic. I read a lot of comics. I spend so much money on Batman comics.
I was gonna say Batman comics are the comics that Halfwit and I spend a lot of money on.
Yeah, I know pretty much nothing. If it's not in the movies or the animated show, I don't know anything about Batman, really.
Okay, gotcha. So I'll try and
I know a few things here and there from some other friends that are really into the comics.
Gotcha. I'll try and sum it up in a very, very short thing then. So this story, Batman Endgame, or Batman the Joker Endgame, it's the last. It's like the last Joker arc of the New 52 era. At the end of which, spoilers if you haven't seen it, but if you haven't, you probably should have at this point. It's been out for like 5 years. Batman dies at the end, but he comes back because he always comes back. Him and Joker have this mutually assured destruction where they go down in the bottom of this cave and whatever, and they die together. It's a whole thing. Jim Gordon becomes Batman for like a year and a half or something like that, and then Batman's brought back because of course he is. But one of the things that happens is that the Joker has used basically a pure form of the Lazarus Pit juice. He has juiced himself up with it, which goes into a whole list of stuff, and then he uses that as a part of his Joker gas or Joker serum or whatever. And when it gets aerosolized, some of the people who get it the worst are they aren't able to be cured. They're not able to be brought back. And 2 of those people are this character Duke Thomas's parents. And so it's just they're trapped behind the smile. Like they talk about how much they hate him when they never were like that before. And it's a part of his character arc is that he has seen his parents be turned into these mindless freaks with the Joker smile plastered across their face. And then it turns out he's a metahuman and can see like 12 different kinds of light or whatever, and it's wild. And he becomes the Signal, which is like the day or Gotham's day hero. It's interesting, and I think it's an interesting character. But just the fact that back to the animated series, whatever, that version of the Joker is terrifying because he leaves you with a fate worse than death, which is just being trapped behind the smile.
So Halfwit, what would you say is your favorite Batman overall live action?
My favorite Batman live action. Okay. My favorite thing is when Batman is a myth. When Batman is the creature of the night, not the man. Which you can only do in like the first couple years. And I think for me personally, the Batman that exemplifies that the best is that one scene of Ben Affleck at like the beginning of Batman versus Superman, where he's interrogating the guy, and then he's up on the wall, and then he's swinging around. He's climbing.
Dude, that was
around,
awesome. The police officer like goes in there, doesn't see him, and then all of a sudden he's up in the. He looks up and he's like stuck up in the corner. And he's like starts like moving around, and he's like, oh
yes. That is the best Batman thing I've ever seen, and then it never comes back again, and he again sort of becomes this man, like just beat the snot out of everyone. But I would, and I think the next best version of that is the Batman from Batman Begins, specifically when he does the drug bust at the shipping docks or whatever it is.
Oh yes.
It's
where are you? And he's like hanging behind him. He's like,
yeah. That's probably the second. That's probably a very, very close second. And something that I really, really love is I love it when Batman is this creature of the night. You don't really know what he is. Is he man? Is he demon? Is he bat? What is he? That's terrifying, and I love it. And it's hardly ever done, and I want to see it done. But again, it can only really be done in the first few years as Batman, because at some point you kind of start to figure out what he is, and then he joins the Justice League, and it wanes, and he becomes more of
Bruce
the sum of
Wayne's.
his parts. Yeah.
Yeah.
But at that point, Batman has developed the Bat family, whether that be with Robin or Red Hood or Red Robin or Tiny Robin with swords. Like
Robin.
where at that point Batman becomes the sum of his parts rather than this myth.
Yeah.
You're fine. I've heard lots of stuff about that too. Tim Drake buys Red Robin and uses it as promotional material for his superhero.
I could not resist.
Oh yeah, no, it's hilarious. Yeah, no, and nor should you. Like it's a great bit to make.
I have a Batman lore question,
Okay.
if
Go
I
for it.
may.
I might know
does Batman marry Catwoman?
Oh boy.
Or did I
Depends
just
on
ask
which-
a terrible question?
Depends on which comic you're reading.
Okay.
The short
Joel.
answer is no. The long answer is no. Basically what
Okay.
happens, and I've just gotten to this point in my own readings. It's during the Rebirth stuff, so I'm a little behind. I lots of things have been happening, but from how I understand it, it was all orchestrated by Bane, and Batman and Catwoman were going to get married, and it was very intentional. And then Bane working in the background actually gets them to split up without either of them actually meaning to. But Catwoman leaves Bruce at the altar because she thinks that she will, I don't know, take away his drive or something for being Batman, and that's who she fell in love with or whatever. So there's still sort of this bat and the cat back and forth thing. They still love each other, whatever, but there's still that tension, especially with the Gotham War, I think it was, which just happened relatively recently. Where it was Batman versus Catwoman, Catwoman kind of becoming the crime boss of Gotham again. It's happened before, and it's happened again where she's kind of taken control, whatever, tried to do things her own way. And it makes it even worse because they were about to get married. They spent like a good probably 7 issues doing wedding planning, which is wild. But it might even be longer than that. It might have been like it was like the build up to this wedding was just insane. They spent like 2 or 3 different graphic novels just talking about like, oh, will you marry me? And then the build up to that, and more build up to that, and more build up to that, and then you get there and she leaves him at the altar, and it's heartbreaking. And Batman's like, it's yeah. Well, he goes and he takes off his tie and he jumps off the building, in a very Batman way, to go to peruse the night or whatever, and then he gets real violent again because it happens every once in a while. You got to give Batman a reason to be angsty and for his family to come and bring him back from the brink. But it was really interesting because from what I've heard, it was all Bane in the background, kind of putting things together, making things line up so that this would happen, so that he could just demoralize Bruce Wayne.
Interesting.
Which
I feel like that'd be a Joker thing to do, not. Well, granted, I don't know my Batman villains very well, I guess.
Well, Bane's done this before when he was first introduced in Nightfall, which I also have and have read all of, which was, it's so long. Not bad, but very long. But when Bane is first introduced, he is, it's relatively similar to the Nightfall movie, except there's no Talia al Ghul, and Bane is actually very smart. But Bane is he runs this prison, right? He was left in the rafters to die. So he lived in the sewer eating rats, and getting flushed every day, which is interesting. But he makes it out, gets on a bunch of steroids, takes over the prison, has nightmares about this bat person, figures out it's probably Batman, goes to Gotham, frees all of Arkham. Batman's got the flu. Batman fights all of Arkham while also having the flu. And Bane has kind of done this intentionally to wear Batman out. And so, while Batman's sick with the sniffles and also fighting all of his rogues, getting burned by Firefly, a wild team up between Joker and Scarecrow to capture the mayor, which was all just crazy.
Interesting.
And several other villains that he, fights. Batman eventually makes his way up to Bane, at which point Bane makes minced meat out of him, snapping him over his knee and then throwing him off of a building. Which happens. And then Alfred and Robin go and save him in an ambulance because they do that. Bring him back. Turns out he's paralyzed. Azrael becomes Batman, and then Batman comes back, beats Azrael, and then Dick Grayson becomes Batman, and then Batman comes back because Dick Grayson can't handle it. or it's not that he can't handle it, but it's a lot. And Batman's like, all right, this is what I need to do, and he gets this whole new costume thing. It's a deal. But that's kind of who Bane has always been, or well, at least from the very beginning, his character was like this, a guy who's actually a lot smarter than people give him credit for.
I see.
That was a really weird tangent, but that was a very roundabout way of getting there. But yeah, no, Bane is known for being really, really smart.
Gotcha. Okay.
Or at least in the beginning, and then it's kind of brought back for this rebirth arc. Is that they've actually made him smart now that he's off the drugs, or something like that. I don't really remember. Again, I haven't finished it yet, but that's kind of what it's
there you
leading
go,
up
guys.
to.
You'll be smart without drugs. That's the lesson.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he doesn't need the drugs to be smart.
Well, I usually like to try to keep these things at about roughly an hour, so people aren't.
But we didn't get to talk about Bigfoot yet.
Hey, next episode, guys. You want to hear about Bigfoot and our thoughts about Bigfoot? Tune in next time.
I've got
this means there has to be a next episode.
Yep. So we are going to try and do this every Wednesday night. We're going to try and record and put it up on Thursdays, I think is what we're going to try and shoot for. So
nice.
Once a week, we're going to try and meet. It'll sometimes it might be us three. Sometimes it might be 4 or 5 of us. We got some other people that want to join in. So this is really exciting. This is really fun. I've enjoyed this a lot. Getting to nerd out. Like I said, Star Wars and more. Tonight you get the more. And so before we go, though, I do want to give these guys an opportunity to kind of showcase themselves a little bit. As I said before, Halfwit down below me here is my artist. He does a lot. He did my logos for me. He's just I've got him I put him to work, and he's still working on stuff for me. So
Halfwit, do you have any? But we got some merch in the works.
We do have some merch in the works and different things. So some stickers, different things like that. But Halfwit, go ahead, show us some kind of your artwork you've been working on lately, and tell people where they can find you.
I mean, again, my biggest thing is the logo. That's my most recent great project, whatever. And I mean, if you really want to see what I'm working on, I do pretty regular updates on my Instagram, and I just set up a new Twitter account because I want to start putting stuff out there again. Fell off the face of the earth for a little while doing music stuff at college, but now I'm doing art stuff for college and turning art into my thing.
There you go. Heck yeah. And where can they find you on Instagram?
Right? Instagram is Halfwit Does Stuff. Twitter is Halfwit Draws.
Okay. All right, cool. Yeah, go follow him, guys. I know he's got a lot of stuff on his Instagram handle. He actually does have quite a few different artworks and stuff that he's worked on. So
and
if you guys want to see, lots more coming. So stay tuned. Also, if you're another fellow channel that sees his work and likes his work, reach out to him. He's open for business. So if you want something done, let him know. So
commissions are open. I'm willing to talk. Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that.
Art's my thing. 100%. Yeah.
Andy, Mr. Andy Classified over there. If you want, you can showcase kind of people what you've been doing, kind of the art style that you have, and just kind of showcase yourself and tell people where they can find you.
Sure. Yeah. So you can find me on Instagram at Andy_classified, and then on Twitter or X as one word, Andy Classified. I do comics. I do illustrations, stuff like that. You can go on to X or Instagram, and you can see some of my artwork. Yeah.
I'll put each of their Instagram handles in the description below on this video. So if you guys want to go check them out, just click on the link and we'll take you right to their Instagram. So
indeed. Yeah. So I do mostly art and comics with talking animals. I'm currently working on a Conan the Barbarian style comic called Barkbarians. It's Conan the Barbarian, but with dogs. And actually,
that's awesome.
The shirt I'm wearing right now is the design for our main character. Her name is Haru. And yeah.
So, do you have any books near you that you can kind of show a little bit?
I do, yes. So I wrote a short novella back in 2020 It's called The King's Heir. If you like Japanese-inspired fantasy, that is The King's Heir. And oddly enough, I wrote this before I ever went to Japan. Now that I've been in Japan, I really would like to redo this because I'm like, there's a lot wrong with this book. But and then
Hey, now that
I've done
you've put it out into the open, now you have to.
exactly. Maybe sequels. And I've done comics. I've been able to print some of my comics. If by the way, if you're looking to print your own comics, look at Mixum. Not affiliated, but they are an incredible printing company.
Awesome.
I did the story and illustrations, but I had someone else do the color because I'm colorblind. So I was able to hire a very good friend, and they did the colors for my own comic. So yeah,
there you go. Sweet. Well, thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing, guys. I appreciate it. Like I said, we want to try and do this every week. Obviously, scrolling down on the ticker down there, you can find me at Star Wars Gazer on YouTube. Obviously, if you're watching this video, you found me. My Instagram handle is Star Wars_Gazer. You can follow me there and catch some of my stuff. I like to try and post some of Halfwit stuff and Andy Classified stuff if I can. Right now, like I said, if once we hit the 100 subscribers, we're gonna do a giveaway to a lucky subscriber. So
let's go.
if you guys want to be part of that, please make sure to subscribe. Super excited about that. As always, we look forward to seeing you guys again next week, and I will still leave it off the way I always do. May the Force be with you always. See you guys.
See ya.